Hello, everybody. Welcome to another webinar from all of us here at Yugabyte. Hope you are staying healthy and safe during these unprecedented times. We have been working behind the scenes on bringing a action-packed release, which is the Yugabyte DB 2.2 release over the last few months. We're excited to finally get it out of the door last week. So this presentation today will focus on what all things that are of importance to you and how you can get started with them, okay? So let's dive in. I know some of you may be new to Yugabyte DB, so just a quick introduction to what Yugabyte DB is. It's Postgres compatible, so the language that you use from your applications, from your migration tools, from your data visualization tools to speak to the database is essentially the Postgres wire language, right? And it's also syntax compatible with Postgres. So the DDL, DMLs that you send to the database are Postgres syntax. High performance, the ability to take a relational database and make it low latency and high throughput in a distributed form factor is very important in today's world, especially when we bring in the next aspect, which is ability to run such a database inside modern cloud native infrastructure that not only includes the horizontally distributed, shared nothing public and private clouds, but also extremely dynamic and elastic environments like Kubernetes without compromising on data integrity in a relational transactional database, right? Last but not the least, we're 100% Apache 2.0 open source. So all the features that I'll talk to you about today are all available to you in open source. You don't need to have a commercial discussion with us in order to use them. And we're very proud of that fact that we don't put in artificial barriers for our developers and our users to adopt certain features in our database. Coming to the architecture, it's a distributed database that uses Raft distributed consensus as the underlying replication protocols, which means that in order to have a resilient cluster, you need minimum of 3 nodes. You can get started with 1 node, but that will be for dev and test and sort of just understanding how the database does certain functional aspects, but not the core distributed architecture, okay? In this 3 node form factor, data is automatically sharded across all nodes. So let's say we take a table 1, right? In this case, then table 1 will be divided into n shards, shard 1 to shard n. And let's take just shard 1, and then a shard 1 leader, which is one of the replicas, will be placed on node 1. Shard 1 follower will be placed on another node, another fault domain, which is node 2. And another shard 1 follower will be placed on a third domain, fault domain, which is node 3. And we do that for all tables and all shards inside them. And that's what makes essentially transactional data so agile, because we can move around these shards and these replicas almost at will by as the configuration of the cluster changes. And that's the last point, which is data is continuously getting rebalanced as nodes are added or removed from the cluster. So this is a very exciting architecture, inspired by Google Spanner, but brought to you in the PostgreSQL form factor. Before I dive into 2.2, I just wanted to give you a window into what the last year looked like. Again, we have been just heads down, bringing the database to you with all the feature richness that's listed here. Let me start just exactly 1 year back when we had our v1.3 release. And that's when we announced, we took a bold stance, which is against the almost every database vendor at the market at that time, which is we made every feature of the database, including the things that we'll talk about: distributed backups, encryption at rest, change data capture, everything that typically vendors try to upsell you. They are in open source Apache 2.0 license, so no barriers for you to adopt them. We also had our release candidate for our SQL API. And we made even, we didn't stop there. We even took, we went one step further. We made the Yugabyte platform, our commercial self-managed DBaaS software, we made it source available under the Polyform free trial license, because the users who are engaged in those commercial conversations are increasingly willing to work with us in an open forum, where they are willing to essentially give us change requests, pull requests, bug fixes over GitHub, and that's an exciting new paradigm which the commercial open source software hadn't necessarily seen before. Coming to September 2019, v2.0, that's when YSQL, the SQL API, became generally available with core relational modeling constructs like indexes, foreign keys, joins, serializable transactions, and even the initial cut of Jefferson testing was included in there. Coming to v2.1, which was earlier this year, we kept on pushing the boundaries of how much depth can we add into a distributed relational database with features that are almost not possible in any other relational database, things like stored procedures, triggers, partial indexes, and so on. And a bunch of this comes because we reuse the Postgres native query layer in Yugabyte DB, but we change that query layer as to how it functions with the underlying storage architecture. And in our case, it happens to be DocDB, which is the globally distributed Spanner-inspired distributed document store. We proved that we are able to increase performance on a steady vector, including like a 10x performance gain through lots of queries being pushed down from the query layer into the distributed storage layer, so that minimal data actually gets moved around in the network. The processing actually moves closer to where the data is located. And as a result, we are able to continue to deliver on our promise of lower latency and higher throughput. We also added the ability to do cross-cluster async replication. The primary starting point for the database, it happens to be synchronous replication through Raft. And even if you stretch that thing across, stretch a single cluster across multiple regions, then it'll still be synchronously replicated. But increasingly, there is a segment of our user population who wants to leverage horizontal write scalability inside a single region, inside a single cluster, but then have a second independent cluster remain as a standby cluster. It can also take writes, but then we will have to handle conflicts through last writer win semantics. And that entire replication model is now based on asynchronous replication. Okay. And the underlying foundation is using the same change data capture framework that we have started developing, and we'll continue to push that to a more general purpose change data capture framework, so that external systems like Kafka, Snowflake, external warehouses can be populated. Read replicas are another exciting geo-distributed aspect, where a few nodes who are part of the same cluster can be put in completely faraway regions, and they can serve timeline consistent reads from those replicas without consulting the primary cluster. But if you send writes to them, they will automatically forward it back to the primary cluster. Additional security features like encryption at rest and in transit integrated with KMS systems and so on. So that's where we were in March 2020. Since March 2020 till July 2020, we have been heads down with Yugabyte DB 2.2, and that's what I'm going to talk about in the next few slides. So what are the highlights? I have categorized the highlights in three categories. One is the generally available category. That's where I'm going to focus most of my time today. There is the beta category, where we have some new exciting features out there for you to try, give us feedback, but they are not ready for you to deploy in production and get started right away. And you can anticipate that when the next major release comes on, these beta aspects are the ones we will try to push towards general availability through more hardening, by listening to all the feedback that would have come in by that time. Last but not the least is the in-design phase, where some really interesting, hard, challenging problems are being solved by the engineering team, and we have publicly available designs for you to review, to comment, give us feedback, so that as we move to essentially getting them towards a beta in the next release, we will be able to again listen to what you have to say. So let me now dive into the generally available aspects. Let's start with one of the very foundational things that every database has to do in order to get to support large, complex production enterprise workloads, right? And that is about backups and ability to restore from backups. But for a distributed transactional database like Yugabyte, this is a whole different challenging problem, because even the data in the backups have to be taken in a distributed manner, so that we efficiently utilize the capacity, the compute and storage capacity that's available all in the nodes. And it has to be done in a transactional manner, so that as we take, I would say, snapshots of the tables and the data, they do not become inconsistent across multiple tables. So for example, a secondary index or an index cannot become inconsistent with its primary table inside the backup, right? You would expect that to happen. Till date, we had the ability to take transactional backups for our the CloudQL API, and for the SQL API, it was primarily you take a full what is known as a dump of the data, but that goes through the logical query layer. As a result, it can be time intensive and resource intensive on the cluster. So this ability to do distributed transactional backups is a major step forward to be able to protect against disasters and user errors without paying high cost in terms of users, resource utilization and time utilization. So how does this function? You have the administration software or tools, like Yugabyte platform is an administration software. YB-admin, which ships inside the open source package, is another admin tool. Using these tools, you will send a create backup command into the database cluster. What the database cluster does is then, since it knows that for a single SQL database, there will be tables, and those tables will have shards, and those shards will be distributed across multiple nodes. For example, here in a single database, there is table 1, table 2, table 3, and they have n shards each, and each of those shards can be located in some of the nodes. So the database cluster's job, when it receives a create backup command, is to come up with a single timestamp that it can then use to take a snapshot across all shards and all tables that are present in this database. And that snapshot then leads to creation of essentially a metadata and a data file. But at this time, this is still an in-cluster backup. So the second piece kicks in, which is to move this in-cluster backup files to an off-cluster backup store. And that's the value add or the power of Yugabyte platform, which is our commercial product, which essentially makes integration with these off-cluster storage systems like S3, Google Cloud Storage, or Azure Blob Storage, or your internal a network file system, does not matter. It moves the backup to this off-cluster location. Now, in the open source, we have the tooling. You are open to write your own automation as to where you want your backup off-cluster backup store should be, and you can develop that on your own, submit it as a pull request for others to use, and so on. So this was a very important addition. Lots of users are excited about it. They're already starting to use, so that's great. Let's go to the second aspect. And this is also a very important problem, especially in a distributed relational database. So, and that is about online index builds. Now, why do we need indexes? Because we want to make our reads or queries faster, and make some of those queries be based on the non-primary key attribute. Now, NoSQL databases always require the primary key attribute. Relational databases shine by their ability to create n of these indexes, so that you can, look up an employee. Even though the primary key is an employee ID, you can look up by their employee name, their last name, their email, their address, and so on. So this is a very, very important, indexing is a very, very important feature. But till date, we required you to essentially know your indexes ahead of time, so that you can create them while the table is getting created. And we used to populate the index values in the background for you as new data came in. Now, that is not always that easy, right? As business requirements change, you would like to be able to create new indices into the system, and the system should be able to give you, start serving your queries back after the index has been created with even index values populated for the older data, which is known as a backfill process, okay? So this is a complicated problem. Google solved it through its, and published a design through its F1 paper. It's a very landmark paper. But as a team, what we have been doing is building a overall online schema changes framework. An index build is actually a schema change as far as the database is concerned. So we're building a full-fledged online schema change framework using that F1 paper as an inspiration. Similar to how sharding replication transactions are inspired by the Spanner paper. Then we have been using the online index build as the first app or first use case on that framework that we have built. Now, when it comes to this index build itself, we pushed ourselves to have 4 key characteristics. It has to be online, which means that it should not stop reads or writes from continuing. And that means the backfill process has to be asynchronous. It has to happen in the background. It's easy to fill the value of the index when new writes come in. It's this backfill is where the challenge, and especially let's say you have millions of rows already populated, then how do you make that backfill online becomes an interesting problem. Second, it has to be correct. So after the index builds are complete, they should be consistent with the primary data and should also obey all kinds of relational constraints that you may have added into the system to make sure the referential integrity is maintained. Third is about efficiency. Now, we are not a single node database. We are a distributed multi-node database. That means our users have already provided multiple nodes, the compute capacity of those multiple nodes and the storage capacity of those multiple nodes is now available for us to utilize in an efficient manner, so that we can handle larger data sets. We can do all this work in a shorter order of time, right? So it is very important that the index build does not get bottlenecked on a single node, or like it happens only on one node at a time, and so on. So this sort of asynchronous parallel background process becomes very important. Last but not the least, it has to be resilient. Let's say there is a node failure during the index build process, and there were 100 million rows, and we had completed 50 million rows. It is unacceptable that when the cluster heals, we should start all the way from the beginning and start rebuilding indexes for the 100 million rows all over again, right? So it should recover from failures automatically through a checkpointing process, so that the build process, irrespective of whether it gets interrupted or not, can continue to remain resilient. Okay. Having said that, what we have been able to deliver in this 2.2 release is essentially the first row, where for both the CloudQL and the SQL APIs, the add index, which is sort of a simple index, is both operationally safe and is supported on both the APIs. What we're moving towards in the next cut is ability to support unique indexes across both the APIs. And then we have to start planning towards ability to add a primary key, assuming you did not excuse me, did not provide the primary key at create time and then altering that primary key. Both of these, the last two problems, are extremely difficult problems for a distributed database. So that's why our focus has been primarily on the non-primary key indexes. Okay. Third big ticket item was about co-located tables. And this is all about how do we make the database provide a lower latency experience for smaller relational data sets. Smaller relational data sets can be, let's say the total data set is, let's say one terabyte, less than 1 terabyte in size. And there are lots of relational data sets that are less than 1 terabyte in size. So this becomes a very important problem. Now, as a distributed database, where sharding is such a fundamental construct, and sharding is what allows us horizontal write scalability, we have to think hard as to how do we provide lower latency for smaller data sets, right? So one way to solve that problem is delay sharding as much as possible. So what co-located tables does is, for a given database, for a given SQL database, it puts all the tables and the relations into a single shard on day one. So why do we do that? Because we take the network out of the equation when cross table or relations are being accessed. The moment we take network out of the equation, the latency experience of the workload dramatically changes naturally, because everything is sort of located inside a single node's purview. So we still continue to provide the value of resilience, right? Where if there is a node failure and that big shard where all these tables were located is lost, then automatically another node takes over and it heals and writes continue. So that's step one. Now, there is a possibility that 1, 2, 3, a few of the tables inside that single database, and I can think of like a database with a retail product catalog database, for example, where most of the product catalog details are stored in small tables, but the product reviews table can potentially be an unbounded increase table. So that particular table, while creation, you can explicitly opt out from the co-location. And that's what is shown here. Database 1 is following the co-location construct. As a result, it is there is only one shard and it has been distributed. But there is a table 5 with, and in our case, let's say it is the use product review table. We can force that table to not follow the co-location semantics and create its own shards, just the way HugoByteDB usually does. Why? Because we expect that table to have a lot more data than some of the tables that are present in the overall SQL database. So this is sort of a win-win scenario where for majority of queries, there will be extremely low latency. And for the queries that are hitting the larger data set, you have sharding to come to your rescue and help you scale them more across more nodes as nodes get added. Now, the natural question is, what happens if one of the tables that I had thought of as small originally on day one becomes big as time progresses? And that's where automatic tablet splitting kicks in. And that feature is currently in beta. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that. But the idea is that as tables grow, we should be able to split them on multiple heuristics. Shard size being a simplistic heuristic, I would say, where we can start pulling that table out from the original co-located table shard and give it its own shard, give it its own room where it comes to compute and storage for horizontal growth. So once all these aspects are available, then magically you can just start every relational workload like this in a simple single shard form factor, and then the database will continue to split in the background for for new shards as the data sets grow, right? So that is going to be awesome. Again, as a high performance database, we want to keep ourselves, sort of challenged ourselves on how we push the boundaries on how the database functions against industry standard benchmarks. Like, for example, TPCC is a classic retail relational workload benchmark, and we have made significant progress between the 2.1 release until the 2.2 release, where you can see that for 10 warehouses, 100 warehouses, and 1,000 warehouses, we are almost close to the theoretical efficiency that TPCC benchmark can achieve, and that too across, potentially thousands of concurrent clients. Now, is the job done? No, it is not done. 97.9, which is essentially 98% for 1,000 warehouses, is a great point. We want to get as close as possible to 100 on all these, and we are also working towards the official benchmarks for 10,000 and 100,000 warehouses. And that obviously means larger clusters, more concurrent clients, and yeah, this sort of showcases that as an app developer, you can start very small as on day one. That's what the 10 warehouses column looks like, and then as you become successful, as your app becomes successful, all you have to do is keep on adding nodes into the system, and then you can get all the way till that 100,000 warehouse, even 1 million warehouse mark is possible, because in this spanner style, horizontally scalable per shard distributed consensus architecture, there is no single point of bottleneck when it comes to performance and availability, because essentially the big distributed system has been broken into small distributed systems at a shard level, and that allows this phenomenal linear scaling with essentially no limits. Again, these concepts were just impossible to even think about a few years back in the realm of relational databases. So very exciting progress. This is the final feature that I'm going to talk about. This is very, I would say, very interesting. And all the stuff I talked about are users, I would say, much deeper in our adoption journey. They're using the software day in and day out, so they understand how Yugabyte architectures is and functions. But what about the new user who starts on day one, right? How do we simplify his or her experience, or their experience is something that we have been thinking out. And one of the items that we have observed over the years is the two server architecture, where YBT server is the primary database server for serving the client workloads, and YB master, which is this metadata server, which does things in the background. It's not in the critical path of the application clients, but is necessary still to make sure that the cluster remains resilient, healthy, does auto rebalancing, and so on. Users sometimes get confused on those two aspects. So what we have been working towards is a new server. It's called Yugabyte D, Yugabyte Daemon, similar to MySQL D, right? Which becomes a parent server for these two, actual Yugabyte servers. And what do I mean by parent server? Means that your experience will be, you do Yugabyte D start, and then you sort of don't care what has been done in the background. You get your you get your API endpoints, and then your clients work towards. Internally, what Yugabyte D is doing is it's launching the YB master process server, it's launching the YBT server. It is coordinating sort of, it's watching them continuously and making sure that they remain healthy. And sort of it is doing a bunch of the hard work that we would have been, let's say, ask you to do, right? So that's, exciting progress in that dimension. In this release, we were focused on the single node experience so that you can easily get started on your laptop. So that's what the experience will look like. What is very exciting to us is the one that we moved to beta, which is the multi-node cluster experience, where all you have to do is on 3 different nodes, you do start with a listen IP of 1, then you do another node with a listen IP of 2, but you join the previous IP, and then you do a third node with a listen IP 3, and you join the previous IP. And this sort of ability to chain together nodes and not necessarily understand that you have to first initialize the YB master service, and then you have to initialize the YBT server service, we feel it's a very important step towards reducing the barrier for our new users to understand and get started with the software. So I will show you Yugabyte D multi-node. This is the beta feature in action on my local laptop, right? So here I have 4 tabs. This is Yugabyte D 2.2 release. I have 4 tabs. In the first 3 tabs, I'm just going to start the Yugabyte D server the way I explained. And in the last tab, I'm actually going to run some queries. Okay, so let's get going. So what here I'm doing is I'm giving a specific base dir, which is where the config files, the data files, all of that will be stored. And I'm giving it a listen IP of 127.0.0.1. In this one, as you can see, I am giving a different data directory, which is data2, and I'm making the servers listen on 127.0.0.2, but I'm making them join the previous, at this time, I can show, as you can see, it's a 1 node cluster, right? So that's all well and good. Now let's do this. Now I'm adding the second node into the system, and let's refresh. And you can see now it's a replication factor 1 cluster with 2 nodes, 1 leader, 1 follower. Excellent. Now I'll do the third one, in which again I'm giving it a data 3, a different listen IP, but I'm joining, I mean, it can be 127.0.0.1, it can be 02, doesn't matter, right? So another node came up, and now if you see, voila, what has happened here is the cluster knows now that it has moved away from a replication factor 1 cluster to a replication factor 3 cluster, because it has now 3 independent fault domains to work with. More intelligence in the software so that you don't have to do the hard work. Now, let's run some queries. So here what I'm doing is using the YSQL SH to go to the first node. And all I'm going to do is go through this tutorial that we have. So let's create a database. Let's go to the database and let's add a schema. Let's add some products. Let's add some users. Let's add some orders these users are doing. And let's add some reviews. Okay. And then what we will do is we'll do a join query. This data is being filled. Let it get filled. And this will show us that our data has been populated correctly. Okay. Great. So, and if I go here, I can see that I have 4 user tables that I populated, right? And I can see those tables here. Excellent. Now I'm gonna do something that is considered crazy in the relational database world. I am going to destroy this node. I'm going to take this node to which I talk to. I'm going to destroy it, kill it, delete its data. Gone. Poof. Okay. Okay, 127.0.0.1, it is not there anymore, right? Now let's go to the second one. See, it is saying that I'm not able to connect, right? And if I go here, it's not there. Now, is my data lost? Let's go to the second node and run the same query. Oh, I first need to go to the database context. So go in here and then do the join query. See, data is still there, right? I am perfectly fine, no issues. I can continue to read, I can continue to write to this cluster as if nothing has happened. And if I bring back that node, then it will join back the cluster and heal as if nothing has happened, right? So this sort of, I would say ability to do so on a relational database across a multi-node environment, and ability to do it this simply and this elegantly is something that we are very excited about, right? And we hope that you put this to test over the next few weeks and give us feedback as to how we can make it better. With that, let me go back to the presentation, and that's it. I have reached the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for joining us today.